The morning had started like any other quiet sunlight spilling through the kitchen window, the smell of fresh coffee mingling with the faint scent of lilies from the garden. I had been looking forward to a simple day, perhaps even a warm conversation with my daughter and her family. The idea of a family vacation had been floating in the air for weeks, and though I had not been directly involved in planning, I had imagined naively that my presence would be expected, welcomed. Even instead, I was met with something far colder. My daughter burst into the room, her phone pressed against her ear, laughter spilling from her lips as she relayed something to her husband. I waited, sensing an unusual tension, but hoping it was trivial. Then, as if rehearsed, he turned to me, my son-in-law, the man who had promised to love and care for my daughter as I had hoped, and his words struck with the force of betrayal. "We only have enough money for tickets for us and my parents," he said, his tone casual, almost dismissive, as if the exclusion were a simple matter of logistics. No hesitation, no thought given to my presence, no acknowledgment of the years I had spent raising my daughter, guiding her, sacrificing for her happiness. And then she spoke, my own daughter, the child I had nurtured, whose laughter had once filled the house like music. Her words cut deeper than any blade, "And we need a break from you." Time slowed in that moment. The sound of her voice seemed unreal, the words echoing in my mind with a deafening clarity. I felt a rush of emotions, shock, hurt, anger, disbelief, but I could not allow them to manifest outwardly. There would be no crying, no outburst. That was not the way I had been raised, and that was not the way I would respond. I smiled, not a tight, forced smile, but a calm, serene one, carefully measured, hiding the storm that roared beneath. "Okay," I said softly, "enjoy your vacation." My voice did not tremble. I did not plead or argue. I simply let them leave, watching them bustle about with excited chatter, unaware of the quiet storm that had taken root within me. As the car pulled out of the driveway, laughter spilling from the open windows, I lingered at the door for a long moment, staring after them. I felt the sting of their words, but beneath the hurt, a seed of resolve began to grow. This was not the end. This was not the victory they thought it was. I remembered the small injustices that had piled over the years, little dismissals, veiled criticisms, moments where my presence had been minimized or ignored. And suddenly the pattern crystallized into clarity. If I remained passive, I would always be sidelined, forever the outsider in the life I had helped to create. But patience, I realized, could be a far more powerful ally than anger. There was a way to respond that did not diminish me, a way to turn their arrogance against them without lowering myself to petty quarrels or vindictive words. I would let them have their moment, let them think they had won, while I prepared a quiet, unassailable form of justice. Sitting in the stillness of the empty kitchen, I allowed myself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The betrayal had stung, yes, but it had also awakened something long dormant. I was not a woman to be ignored, not a mother to be sidelined, and certainly not a human being to be disrespected. And so, as the driveway lay empty and the laughter faded into memory, I began to plan not with haste, not with malice, but with the careful, deliberate patience that only years of experience could teach. They would see, and when they did, it would be in a way they could never have anticipated. The house felt heavier after they left, quieter, emptier, stripped of the warmth a family should carry. But beneath that silence, something else stirred. Where hurt once sat like a stone in my chest, a new determination began to pulse steadily, like a heartbeat regaining strength. I spent that first evening sitting at my dining table, hands folded, staring at the untouched cup of tea slowly cooling in front of me. My daughter's words replayed over and over. "We need a break from you." So casual, so carelessly cruel, as if I were a burden, as if I hadn't spent decades giving her every ounce of the love and support I had. But grief is a peculiar thing. It arrives in waves. Some drown you, some wash you clean. Mine did both. By the next morning, something had shifted. The grief had settled into a quiet corner of my heart, replaced now with clarity and purpose. Not revenge born of spite or anger, but of dignity, respect, self-worth. If they wanted a break from me, then they would have it, but not in the way they imagined. I went into my study, where everything remained exactly as I left it. My documents, my investments, the papers from decisions I'd made quietly over the years. Few people knew how carefully I'd managed my finances after my husband passed away. Fewer still knew just how successful I had become through patience, wise choices, and the kind of discipline that comes from rebuilding a life alone. My daughter and son-in-law never asked. They rarely paid attention when I mentioned anything about my business dealings. In their minds, I was just Mom, someone who baked for holidays and babysat when asked. They never bothered to look deeper. That was their mistake. I opened a folder that had been sitting on my desk for nearly 6 months, a proposal to invest in a rising resort chain expanding into luxury, family-oriented hotels. I had been back and forth about it, unsure if I wanted to take on something so large, but now the decision came effortlessly. A single phone call set everything in motion. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," the executive answered, his voice bright and respectful. "We've been waiting to hear from you." I let a small smile touch my lips. "Let's finalize the purchase." We set up a meeting for that afternoon. I knew that the hotel my daughter and her husband had booked, an island resort they had raved about endlessly, was part of the chain I was about to become the majority owner of. They had no idea how close I had been to sealing this deal for months. The timing was almost poetic. After the call, I gathered paperwork, investment contracts, and identification. Sliding everything into a leather folder, I paused, letting my fingertips rest on its cover. Enough money for them and his parents. I murmured softly, "And they need a break from me." The words no longer hurt. They motivated. The meeting with the board went exactly as expected. I had come prepared, calm and decisive. The executives, already eager for my involvement, presented the resort's performance, expansion plans, and financial projections. I listened, asked questions, and negotiated firmly, surprising them with my insight and precision. One man, a senior director, leaned back in his chair, studying me with newfound respect. "It's rare," he said, "to see someone step into ownership with this level of confidence." I met his gaze steadily. "Life teaches you confidence when people assume you don't deserve it." By late afternoon, it was done. Signed, finalized, irrevocable, just like that, I became the new majority owner of the entire resort chain, including the very hotel where my daughter and her husband planned to vacation. When I left the building, the sun had begun to set, staining the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The bitterness from earlier felt distant now, replaced by a deep, steady sense of control, not revenge, justice. A reclamation of the respect they had denied me. The next steps were simple. I booked a flight for the following morning and arranged a private meeting with the hotel's general manager. I instructed him not to announce my arrival to anyone, but to prepare a suite, to ensure staff knew who I was, and to be ready for my directives. He complied enthusiastically, but the sweetest part, I didn't plan to confront them immediately. No patience was a language they had forgotten I spoke fluently. The real satisfaction wouldn't come from anger or confrontation. It would come from letting them walk into their vacation, believing they had freed themselves from me, believing they had done something clever or necessary, only to discover that the person they tried to exclude was the one responsible for everything around them. They wanted distance. They wanted freedom from me. They wanted space, so I would give it to them, but on my terms. That night, as I packed my suitcase, I paused at a framed picture on my dresser. My daughter at 5 years old, smiling with missing front teeth, hugging me with all the innocent love a child could give. A pang of sadness touched me, but it didn't linger. I touched the glass gently, whispering, "You'll understand someday." Then, with calm certainty, I finished packing, zipped my suitcase, and turned off the lights. The preparations were complete. The stage was set, and soon, very soon, their vacation would become something they would never forget. The morning of their arrival was bright and cheerful, the kind of day that begged for laughter and sun-drenched leisure. Birds chirped along the palm-lined driveway of the resort, their carefree melodies entirely oblivious to the storm that was about to unfold inside. My daughter and her husband stepped from the shuttle bus, suitcases rolling behind them, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. The hotel lobby was bustling with families, children squealing as they chased one another across the polished floors. The scent of salt water mingled with the faint aroma of fresh flowers arranged in ornate vases. Everything was as they had imagined, a paradise untouched, a temporary escape from the ordinary. Everything, that is, except for me. I stood in the shadows near the grand staircase, perfectly poised in a tailored outfit, my presence commanding yet subtle. Not a guest, not a casual observer. I was Asterisk, the owner Asterisk. Every detail of the resort answered to me, every employee aware that I held the ultimate authority. And yet, to the unsuspecting family, I was just another figure in the crowd. For a moment, I let them revel in their blissful ignorance, letting their laughter echo off the marble floors. The anticipation of the moment they would finally realize, oh, the sheer sweetness of it, was almost too much to bear. Then it began. Their first mistake was the check-in. My daughter approached the front desk, smiling nervously. My son-in-law handed over the reservation confirmation, expecting polite service and perhaps a nod or two. Instead, the manager, briefed and slightly trembling under the weight of protocol, smiled and said, "Of course, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, welcome, and just so you know, the owner is here. She'll be overseeing your suite personally today." My daughter froze. The words seemed to hang in the air, suspended, refusing to settle into her mind. She looked up, her eyes scanning the lobby, and then, slowly, deliberately, they met mine. I was standing there, serene, composed, arms lightly crossed, a small smile playing on my lips. Their faces went pale. "You're here," my son-in-law stammered, the confidence in his voice crumbling. I didn't know, you didn't expect." I said softly, almost pityingly, that I could have arrangements of my own, didn't you? I allowed the words to linger, watching their expressions shift from disbelief to panic. The carefully constructed bubble of their arrogance was collapsing, and I reveled in every subtle fracture. The next hours were a delicate dance of control and subtle humiliation. I ensured the staff treated them impeccably, but always by asterisk, my rules asterisk. Their favorite suite was slightly modified, not enough to be unpleasant, just enough to remind them that I, not they, held the power. Reservations for activities required my approval. Meals they assumed were pre-booked required confirmation from me. I appeared at unexpected moments, the pool, the lobby, the private beach. Always calm, always composed, always unassailable. My daughter's smile became strained. She tried to maintain the illusion of a normal vacation, but I saw every flicker of panic, every hesitation, every glance she stole at me when she thought I wasn't looking. My son-in-law's usual arrogance dissolved into flustered apologies and awkward compliance. Every command I gave, every decision I made, even minor ones, served as a reminder of their earlier insult, the presumption that I was inconsequential, that my presence could be dismissed. And still, I did not scold, did not raise my voice. Sweet revenge rarely needs volume. The quiet, controlled assertion of authority, the calm reminder of what they had taken for granted, was infinitely more powerful. By the end of the first day, the lesson had been learned. My daughter's eyes, once sparkling with casual confidence, now reflected awe tinged with guilt. My son-in-law, who had spoken so carelessly at the kitchen table weeks ago, now followed instructions with a humility I had never expected. I found them on the terrace that evening, a sunset painting the ocean in golds and purples. They sat in uneasy silence, realizing that the vacation from me they had so eagerly planned had become a vacation entirely under my watchful presence. I approached them slowly, letting the moment stretch. My voice was soft, deliberate, carrying no malice, only quiet authority. "Enjoying your break?" I asked. My daughter's mouth opened, then closed, words failing her. My son-in-law shifted uncomfortably, fumbling for an explanation that didn't exist. I smiled, not a cruel smile, not a triumphant one, but the kind that comes from knowing your worth, knowing that you have turned betrayal into clarity, ignorance into awareness. "Yes," I continued, "it seems you needed this break more than you realized." And as I walked away, leaving them to reflect, I felt the warmth of satisfaction. Sweet, patient, inevitable satisfaction, not loud, not explosive, just complete. For the first time in weeks, I slept that night with a quiet peace. The storm of betrayal had passed, replaced by the calm, unwavering knowledge that I had reclaimed my dignity, my respect, and my rightful place, not as a guest, not as a subordinate, but as someone who could command the world around her while still maintaining grace, and they had learned it without me ever needing to shout. The morning after their first full day at the resort, I walked along the private balcony of my suite, looking out over the ocean. The waves rolled in rhythmically, endless and unbothered by human dramas. I sipped my coffee, the warmth seeping through my hands, and for a moment allowed myself to simply breathe. The vacation had unfolded exactly as I had envisioned, calm, subtle, precise. My daughter and her husband, for the first time, truly understood that exclusion comes with consequences. They hadn't needed a loud confrontation, a dramatic argument, or an angry storm of words. They had experienced the quiet power of patience, planning, and dignity. And yet, even as satisfaction coursed through me, there was a twinge of something else, sadness, regret. A quiet ache for the daughter I had once held in my arms as a child, a daughter who had so casually dismissed me. But I reminded myself she had grown just as I had. Growth comes in many forms, and sometimes lessons are learned the hard way. Throughout the following days, I observed them navigating their freedom under my authority. Every decision they made, every hesitant glance at me, reminded them that I was more than just a mother. They had underestimated my mind, my influence, and my resolve. Yet I was not cruel. I allowed them moments of joy, laughter, and beauty. I let them swim in the ocean, walk the garden paths, and enjoy the sunsets, but always on my terms. The lesson was clear. Respect is earned, trust is fragile, and exclusion can be more damaging than any harsh word. In those quiet moments, I reflected on my own journey. The hurt I had felt, the sting of betrayal, had been transformed into power. Not the power to destroy, but the power to reclaim. The sweet satisfaction was not in seeing them embarrassed or flustered, but in witnessing the shift in perspective, the awareness that arrogance and disregard have consequences. And there was a deeper satisfaction. I had done it all while remaining composed, graceful, and true to myself. My revenge was not loud or petty. It was elegant, deliberate, and undeniable. By the end of their vacation, something remarkable had shifted. My daughter approached me quietly one evening, eyes downcast, voice soft but sincere. "Mom," she said, hesitating. I didn't understand before. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said what I did. We underestimated you." I studied her, noting the weight in her tone, the genuine reflection in her eyes. A small, gentle smile formed. "It's all right," I replied. "We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them." Her husband, standing awkwardly beside her, nodded silently, finally realizing that arrogance and entitlement had no place when confronted with quiet strength. I didn't lecture, I didn't gloat. I simply let them feel the lessons they had earned. As I watched them walk down the beach later that evening, their laughter returning, tempered now with humility and awareness, I felt a deep sense of closure. The betrayal had been real, the hurt undeniable, but so too had been my capacity to rise above it, to reclaim my dignity and self-worth. I realized then that true power lies not in confrontation, but in patience, in strategy, and in the quiet knowledge that one's value cannot be diminished by the ignorance of others. The vacation ended. They returned home, carrying memories both bitter and instructive. And I remained behind, standing at the balcony, the ocean stretching endlessly before me, feeling a rare and complete peace. For in the end, the lesson had been delivered not with anger, not with bitterness, but with calm, unwavering grace. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.